Hey everybody, thank you so much for joining me for another episode of 10 Minute Tuesday. If you haven't already, please like, share, and subscribe. In today's episode, I got the homie Christina in the building. Christina, what's going on?
Hey, Seku, good to see you.
Good to see you too. Good to see you too. All right, let's go ahead and dive into it, man. Christina, go ahead and introduce yourself to the people.
Everybody, I'm Christina Gorga. I am a longtime, I guess you would call it, sort of an analytics strategist slash analyst slash whatever you want me to be. I kind of go by a lot of different career paths within even data. So I've been in this space now, I would say, formally speaking, for going about 10 years. In a past lifetime, I always say I was a cognitive psychologist by training and education, but by way of being with just amazing, awesome, cool, very smart people, I made my way accidentally into data, like many of us do, and that has been my passion, my drive for the last 10 or so years. So I've kind of meandered through. The consulting world. Right now, I currently work for Booz Allen Hamilton, currently based out here in the Washington, D.C. area. And I absolutely adore and love projects that are, challenging, a lot of them hitting things like healthcare data, operations, corporate strategy, just any kind of interesting nitty gritty ways that I can figure out how are people utilizing data? How can we make it better for them? How can we create some ways that we can deduplicate a lot of processes that we have, as well as trying to automate a lot of things because process automation is a huge part of access and accessibility and for people to understand what they actually need to do, their day-to-day jobs. So I really love sort of the nuances of the work that I do, but also I like the opportunities to integrate and work alongside with the broader data community, which we both belong to. So that's just kind of a little jump starter to like what I do on my day to day.
Love it, love it. So, done a number of things. You've been in it for a while, 10 years, but at a certain point, you had to get your start. So, what really compels you to get into data to even begin with?
It's a really good question. I kind of call it my bridge year. So between my PhD work, which I left to kind of do more applied work in education research, I ended up under the amazing helm of a woman. Her name is Dr. Jennifer Hamilton. She used to work with me at a company called Westat. We did a lot of what we kind of call like program evaluation work. So looking at the effectiveness of educational technology, as well as job preparedness programs. And a lot of those were funded by Institute of Education Sciences under the Department of Ed, as well as a lot of private foundation work. And Jen sort of saw the potential in me, and she said, "Hey, I want to introduce you to a bunch of people that do visual communication, visual analytics." And so she introduced me to not one, but a couple of women actually in the space. So she introduced me to a woman named Anne Emery. She got her start also in education research and a lot of nonprofit work, but she made it her thing to basically hone her skills and do data visualization as a huge part of her offering. So I looked at her, I asked lots of questions about, okay, what is this data visualization field? Keep in mind, though, this is like 2013, 2014. So it's not like really a fully formalized field, I feel like, as we see it now and how it's evolved. So I feel like in a weird way, I sort of was kind of at the forefront of a lot of people choosing to go into data visualization as kind of our primary focus. So from there, I just sort of dove straight in. I read a lot of books from the very beginning. So I read, Stephen Few. There was another author, I'm trying to remember, her name is Mona, I'm forgetting her last name, but it was the Wall Street Information Design book. There was a couple of others in there too. Stephanie Evergreen is another one of the women that I really looked at some of her work as well. And then how I kind of made my way into the Tableau world is I started reading Bridget Cogley's blog a lot because I think we share a very similar sort of different career paths that we chose to do and then how we've sort of found our way into data. So I found that, Bridget's voice and sort of her career path sort of spoke to me as somebody that wasn't necessarily doing business intelligence from the get-go. And so I sort of took a lot of these little bits and pieces of information, kind of made it sort of my own sort of I guess, customized career path, and then I made my way fully fledged into a data analytics consultancy that focuses primarily on federal healthcare clients. So, which is technically under Optum these days. So, it was called the Lewin Group. It was like only at that time like a 300 person firm,
Mhm.
but it was one of the ways that I really got myself in knee deep in the world of Tableau and really had to hone my skills very quickly, probably even more so than a lot of my other colleagues, just because I didn't come from that background. So not only was I learning healthcare, terms and acronyms, because the world of healthcare data is a lot of acronyms. And then I was also learning how to know the ins and outs of using a tool like Tableau. And so I found myself sort of indispensable, and I loved it so much that I wanted to pursue that like more, even more so, with doing more enterprise development. So that's how I kind of made my way to Booz Allen, which is a obviously a much bigger firm, and it gave me a lot more opportunities to do things at scale. So that's kind of how I've sort of made my way into this world of data. Again, I feel like no path is the same. You're going to find that a lot of us sort of made our way accidentally from one way or another. A lot of us came from different majors. I feel like that maybe nowadays is a little bit different now that things are a little bit more formalized in universities for actual business analytics or data science careers. But for those of us, and you're probably a similar um, age to me, I'm imagining, but I think that you and I probably have a very similar trajectory. And like none of us really came from formalized degrees. A lot of us are either self taught or we learned via community. And that I feel like is a huge, huge part of my development, as well as probably most of my peers that I see, either in the Tableau or just the broader data community world out there.
Love it, love it, love it. Yeah, so similar concept. I graduated business information systems, and I remember taking a SQL class, but I was like, I'm not going to use SQL. And then years later, right, I'm all about
Like you're
databases and
using
everything,
it
right?
a
It's
lot.
crazy, right? So it was
Uh-huh.
insane. All right, so I have a philosophy that I live by and I like to implement it on the show. It's called failing forward, right? So everything you
Mm-hmm.
learn is you learn from it, but you don't really fail. You just learn and grow and you evolve from it.
Mm-hmm.
So with that in mind, what would you consider your biggest failure, quotation marks around failure, and what did you learn from that experience in your career?
I am definitely somebody that one won't take no for an answer. And then two, kind of following on to that, is sometimes I would take on learning and trying to implement things so much on my own that I would get stuck in problems for, hours on end. And not realizing, hey, Christina, it's okay. You may be experienced in some things, but it's okay to ask questions or to lean on another colleague that may have a better sense of the kinds of problems that you're working with. So for example, like I leaned on recently somebody that knew a lot more about Azure than I do. And so I said, hey, how do I implement like these data flows? How do I do this? Because I've never done this before. I might know other parts about like more of the publication or like the front end side, but I don't know a whole lot about Azure. So like, give me like I don't know, the primer to like what I need to do to solve this problem. And they kind of gave me some resources. They sat down with me, and so what I learned from that experience is that one, it's okay to ask questions and it's okay to say, hey, I might not know everything, even if you consider yourself experienced. I think that's a big fault that even experienced people say to one another is like, you need to solve the problems on your own before you go to somebody else. And I think that also introduces other potential problems or, just other issues down the road. And I'm a huge believer in collaboration and teamwork. And so I do believe that not one person should do all the things. I think that also to that point is everyone has a sort of specialty or like their special sauce. Not one person can do all the things well. I think it's really helpful to understand or have a general understanding of everything, the lay of the land. But I think realistically speaking, it's good to have just like one or two things that you're absolutely great at. And that way people can come to you and you can kind of use that as sort of your, kind of your go to market strategy. It's like, hey, I'm Christina. I'm really good at thinking about systems, like systems wide thinking. And how to lean on certain connections and certain people to do things really, really well in an organization, and bringing those people together in the same space, and like how to train others on how to do things right. So providing those platforms, providing those spaces where people can learn from each other is really my special sauce. And sometimes it took me a long time to get to that point, but then I realized I'm a really big people plus processes person. I'm probably not the best at sitting down in front of a laptop all day. I think that's where I've sort of found myself drained quite a bit. Now, over time, like I've learned that, hey, there are certain times where I have to do that, but finding jobs or like for projects where it's a little bit more of a blending of the two, where I'm probably maybe like more like 30 to 40% like building and developing things, but then that 50 to 60%, I'm really driving towards talking to a lot of people and just providing those spaces to learn from one another. And I think that that's where I sort of drive my energy. And what I found was over time, what I did well. And somebody that's within my team might not do as well on that, but they're really, really good at like figuring out all these little like data puzzles and, the ETL, the back end stuff. And I'm like, wow, I wouldn't have even thought about doing it that way.
Love
And
it.
so I really believe in finding spaces where each person can kind of lean on what is their special sauce. And that way we can kind of complement each other and also learn from one another too.
Cool, cool. Love that. Love that. All right. So the target audience for this are people who are just either getting started out in their career or they're pivoting into data, so they don't know, how to get into it. So, what's one piece of advice you give someone who's just starting out in their career?
Oh, I think finding reading up on a lot of things, first off, kind of like what I did. I think trying to immerse yourself in as much of the literature, what is going on in the broader data community. Back in the day, I used to use something called Google Reader, which, rest in peace, does no longer exist anymore. But you can use things like LinkedIn, Threads, Twitter, if that's more your jam, or Blue Sky, to kind of figure out who is doing really cool work in this space. And that kind of helps give you a broader sense of, hey, what do I want to do? Because even within data analytics, there's still like a lot of these sub communities. So I feel like getting sort of a lay of the land, understanding what is currently happening, not only just current trends, but what are the baseline things that you absolutely have to learn. So like what you were saying is like, at least just having a very rudimentary understanding of SQL. You don't have to do it full time for your job, but just really having an understanding of the baseline things that make everything else tick. For me, I kind of went backwards. I learned Tableau first, and then I learned a lot of the other necessities to do my job, which is fine. If I had my way of doing it again, I probably would have done some things in parallel. I probably would have learned SQL and Python at the same time I was learning a bit of
Mhm.
Tableau. And I mean, that was kind of the day and time. But I do believe in sort of getting a sense of the lay of the land. And then secondly is find people that really maybe represent what you want to do in like a year or two from now. So say for example for me, it would be I want to look at people that are really doing a lot in data governance. Like who is a data governance manager or director? So that's something that I'm currently working on right now. Who is doing really good work in the data governance space in the kinds of organizations that I want to, either work with as clients or, if I wanted to transition to somewhere outside of federal work. So who's doing really cool work in that space and how can I connect to their experiences, learn from them? And then also, too, it sounds crazy, but like doing some cold reach outs to some of these people and say, hey, I want to learn something from you. Can I get like a virtual coffee, or if they're local to you, say offer some time on their calendar or what works best for them to just start to develop a relationship. And I think that that is really key for growth as well as for understanding what are the key skills or like experiences that I need to have and cultivate in my current job that I can take with me elsewhere and apply. So that's what I would suggest to anybody that's kind of looking
Love
to
it.
explore careers in this space. Because again, it is so much more than data viz these days. It is a bit of everything. You can basically choose your own adventure when it comes to it. And I've found that sort of carving out my own niche and space for data adoption, literacy, and governance is kind of where my sweet spot is.
Love it. Love that. Love that. And you're so right about following people who are doing really good things. And I've always you're giving me an excuse to say this on recording. So if you are listening to this and you're early in your career, don't always follow the influencers about it. Like, follow the people who are actually in the weed and in the trenches and doing the things. Like, the influencers are awesome, they have good viewpoints, but some of this stuff is clickbait. So follow the people who are actually in the craft. And you know they're in the craft because they're posting stuff about what's happening day in and day out and current events, and they're actually doing the technology. So that's my biggest piece of advice. And Christina, you gave me an excuse to say that out loud on paper.
Oh, that is 100%. I think that there's a lot of people that are hyping up their careers to be, talking about the things, but they may or may not be doing it in their day-to-day jobs.
Yeah,
There's that sweet spot of the people who are the actual practitioners. And, there's a lot of communities to go into. I know there's like the DAMA, the data management professionals crew. I've also sort of expanded my community sort of understanding into things like Dataversity, which offers a lot of interesting talks and platforms for talks on like things like data governance, which I wouldn't otherwise known if I hadn't worked on a data governance focused project with somebody that said, hey, go listen and interact with some of the folks in Dataversity because they know their stuff. And so if it wasn't for those folks, I probably wouldn't have even known of some of these other like data enclaves. So go to where the practitioners are talking to one another. That's a great way to start.
for sure, for sure. All right, Christina, where can listeners find you at online?
You can find me on LinkedIn. I also procrastinated on doing this a while ago, but I have been building the building blocks of a podcast that's going to be called the Scatter Plot. So it's basically going to be sort of the intersection of data and culture and a little bit of just fun banter and interaction with folks that kind of crisscross across data and then other sort of interrelated fields. So I'm really excited to start that in the new year. So watch out for my announcements on LinkedIn. They'll be coming up here in the new year.
Awesome. We'll make sure your LinkedIn is tagged in the description. Follow Christina, connect. Appreciate you taking time out today, Christina. It's fantastic to
Absolutely.
have a
Thank you.
conversation. Cool. Appreciate
Great.
it. Appreciate it. And as I said in the beginning, if you haven't already, please like, share, and subscribe. And we'll talk to y'all next week. Have a great day.
Thank you, everybody.